Now originally this all started as a dumb joke on Discord. You see, the new model for the demon Fulgrim had come out, and I'm sure everybody on the internet in the fandom had their own opinions and things to say about it. And then a couple of people, including me on the Discord, made a really dumb joke that Snake Fulgrim, Snulgrim, Snake Tail Fulgrim, Snailgrim. And that was really what got the ball rolling in my mind. What would Fulgrim look like if he fell to Nurgle instead of Slaanesh? Now, just before we get into this, I have to point out a slight, I wouldn't call it a bugbear, but more of a wish about how Nurglites and Nurgle Marines are depicted. I have no problem with them being malformed. I love that. It speaks to how chaos really twists the body along with the mind. It's just that everything is about plague and pestilence, which Nurgle is about, but it's all boils and pus and buboes and green skin and pink skin and everything like that. And I just wanted to go a slightly different direction with this. In fact, one of my big wishes is that we could get some Nurgle Marines or Nurgle Demons that are more deep sea themed, you know, like the crew of the Flying Dutchman that we see in the Pirates of the Caribbean, who I think would really fit right into the Warhammer 40k universe and the Nurglite faction without even having to do that much. You know, they're rotting, their brains are falling out, they're covered in coral, their skin and their bones are twisted like they're bloated and drowning at the bottom of the ocean, which again ties into the whole death and rot thing which Nurgle has going on. And also, it means I can tie the snail theme back into this, because sea snails are a thing, and after looking up some cool snail shells for inspiration, instead of your regular old stripy garden snails, I found these guys. Some ancient mollusks, which I really love the curling asymmetrical shape of. They look like bowels all twisted and writhing, but cast in stone, or probably ceramite in this case. And this guy, the carrier snail, who fuses other shells to itself, creating a sort of morass of armour and like abandoned, desiccated husks, which again, I love the idea of. That really works for me. Now, of course, that's not to say I don't hate everything about how the canon Nurglites are presented. Spikes, we can do that, that fits in great. So I've drawn this twisted shell. I'm going to add some nice spikes here in a nice big ring, so very don't touch, you'll get stabbed with that. And just here, I'm going to go back to that snail theme again, but go into the gross, oozy aspect of Nurgle here. I'm going to do a foot, which is the term for a snail's tail or main body, and I'm drawing it down here almost like a skirt or a robe, and it's going to be puffy and oozing around him, very shapeless and a bit bulgy here and there, just as I draw in the pads of the foot here, almost like he's coming out of a kneeling position, almost like he was bowed under the weight of his own shell. Kneeling, supplication. I think, without going into the word bearer side of things, I just think it really works. Even if the Primarch in question isn't particularly religious, I know Nurgle prefers that whole toxic family love thing. It's, as a subconscious thing, submission, just, it works. Okay, I'm just adding it. Also, it means I can really fold up the character design, the form of the body, and explore how the skin folds, and there's the oozing, and, well, I'll get to that in a bit. Okay, now going back to what I was saying about the snail foot. Nurgle, again, another Nurglite thing is not that they're impenetrable, but rather they can tank any hit you throw at them, like even if their guts spill out, they just keep walking, they laugh at it, like not that they love getting hurt, but more that they don't feel pain. And I wanted to stick with that idea, so here I'm drawing several melee weapons that are embedded in his hide, for want of a better word, and maces, some spears, some swords. I think I might maybe do a couple in purple, almost like they're from the Emperor's Children. But yeah, they're just stuck in his slime, in his skin, and perhaps maybe when he loses his main weapon, or if he wants no weapon in his offhand, he can pull one free, and it's just a mass scabbard made of goo and flesh. So there's that. Right, now here I am drawing his hand. Again, a little bit stereotypical. I'm just doing a typical spindly, long-nailed hand. I don't know, I might add some saggy skin, almost like it's sagging off the bone in a bit. But what I really wanted to do is really work with the size, because demon Primarchs, they're depicted as big, bigger than normal Primarchs, but not big. And by big I mean Dark Souls boss big, really. I'm talking Eldritch Abomination big. And so just playing with the scale, I needed something for scale. So here I'm drawing some human limbs, because you know what snails do? They like to eat. And so the idea behind this is that Demon Primarch Fulgrim, Demon Primarch of Nurgle, would scour the battlefields either on-game battlefields or post-battle battlefields, and search for corpses that he could pick up and eat and stuff in a giant gaping mouth to fuel this inevitable growth. The more he eats, the bigger he gets. And so you just end up with this slow-moving, but actually probably relatively fast, but slow-moving, unstoppable juggernaut who ploughs, who digs his fingers through the dirt, combing it for corpses buried in the mud and bits of broken limbs and bodies, and holds them in his fist like popcorn and shovels them into a giant gaping maw, probably on his belly like actual snails have, but he's just shoveling them in to feed this insatiable hunger. So yeah, apologies, I got a bit into that, but yeah, that was the idea. It was also what the cannibalism warning was before in the beginning, so sorry about that. Moving on. Right, now just to finish off the sketch bit, weapons. In canon, Fulgrim had the layer blade, but that doesn't quite work for the imagery I'm going with. So what I'm going with here is, it could generously be called a sword, I think, but in keeping with the whole endless hunger theme, it's a meat cleaver, it's a butcher's cleaver, but because it's a chaos cleaver, it's got teeth. It's a saw blade with actual humanoid or near humanoid teeth as its cutting edge, so it's not like a typical rusty blade with edges serrated from rust and disused, but actual teeth. And I'm also considering having them set in gums, because why not? And also the handle it's again going back to the sea theme, it's going to be driftwood worn, smooth by aeons of seawater tossing it on the shores, and it's coiled around this broken hunk of metal which has teeth sprouting out of it. And also I was slightly inspired by that ancient paleo art of that shark with a spiral jaw, so instead of a typical cleaver with a straight tip, I'm just going to add almost like a hook with its own teeth, pointed teeth this time, just on the end. And now that the sketch is completed, we're going to go on to the outline. Now you might be asking, why am I using a brown pen for my line art? That's because I want it to match with the eventual colours. I'm hoping to get quite a lot of green and brown in there, maybe some grey. I'm actually thinking of a nice grey blue, but anyway, I find that black is far too stark. You end up with it looking far too much like thick cartoon outlines, and I don't really want that. So here we're looking at the teeth. I've done lots and lots of tiny teeth, which is perfect for his belly, and you can see. And now I'm just drawing his ribs, or rather where his ribs are fused into his snail shell. Because yes, you see, I was inspired by that picture of the old ammonite shell and how it was very ridged, and I thought instead of putting it on his back, I could have it growing sideways out of his ribs, which technically is also how snails work, real life snails. So as you can see, his ribs are coming down and into the ridges of the shell, partially protruding through the skin. Now this bit you'll see in a minute, this is where I've added some more deep sea themes, but as you can see here, he's still got his arm, it's still a very normal human arm, but instead of just plain skin or even your classic warts and buboes and pus, I've put some nice little tentacle furs, almost like anemone tentacles, like that. I'm thinking they'll probably be a very pale white, like dahlia anemones, I think is the species I'm thinking of. So yeah, the tentacles are probably very, very poisonous and very, very bad for your health. And I'm just going to add a few here, almost like they're sprouting out of his skin, like almost like fake feathers. You'll see in a minute what I've done with his pauldron. But instead of that very winged piece and his very eagle-like theme that he had going on with his Legion symbol, I'm actually replacing it with anemone tentacles like feathers. Right, now onto the pauldron. Now you can see why I mentioned that carrier snail right back at the beginning, because like I said, these carrier snails, they fuse old abandoned shells to their own self, and that is what I've done with the pauldron. See, the hollowed out shape of a pauldron really works for this, and like the canon typical Nurglite spikes, this has spikes, it's just that now they're pointed shells that have been fused to it, and you can see I've also replaced the normal, I think it's a claw holding golden ball, which is in canon in his normal form. I've replaced that with a bird skull, and it's a little difficult to see, but you'll see it later on once I finish the line work. Right, I'm just going over his shell now, just with the line work, and you can see that in the cracks of his shell I've added some, they probably look like barnacles, and they're sort of supposed to be, but actually I wanted to call back to his childhood on Chemos, and so these are actually going to be smokestacks. They're going to be spewing some foul gas or miasma into the air, just because Chemos is probably where his Fulton Nurgle might have started, with the hopelessness of the poor living conditions and the sicknesses and the respiratory infections that would have plagued the people of Chemos that he looked after. Right, going back to his legs, or rather leg, you'll see that this one isn't encased in the mantle, and yes, I'm drawing slime, snail slime on it, but actually I wanted to do something different for this leg. I was very inspired by The Pale Man from Pan's Labyrinth, the Guillermo del Toro film. Amazing film, honestly, great practical effects. But The Pale Man, he's supposed to be this shrunken, starved, anorexic looking creature that feeds on children, and that just fitted perfectly with the theme I was going for. So yes, I was inspired by it. I'm not recreating the Pale Man, as you can see. So yes, I've got the flabby skin on a very thin, bony frame, because yeah, that's just an amazing design. It really sells the creepiness of it, that even though there's this hunger and you're feeding it and you're gorging yourself on horrible things, on everything you can find of, there's still that insatiable hunger that you can't get rid of. Right, now we're going to be moving on to colour. Right, so I'm just starting with the shells up here. I've already done, sorry about that, I already did his main shell. I lost the footage on that one, the camera didn't record it, so I'm sorry about that, but you will see it later on, I promise. There'll be pictures in the end. But I'm just doing the shoulders on his pauldron, the shells on his pauldron rather, and some nice peaches and browns and creams. just because I'm going to do his arm in white, so it will go. Right, now you should be able to see the symbol of Nurgle. I've just done that in a very cold grey iron, so it stands out because I'm keeping that bone white, almost calcified look for the skull and the tentacles as well, almost like they're living ceramite. So I'm just going to do the same patterns that I did on the shells. Now because this is a corrupted Fulgrim, he's still got tiny elements of the gold and purple that he had before. It's just going to be, the purple is going to be bleached out from the shells, from the calcium deposits, and the gold, it's going to be rusted over. I'm going to put some nice brown rust here, just enough gold that you can see it, and then I'm just going to put some nice big black mould spots on there, mildewy, all seeping through the cracks like seawater. Right, now onto the gross bit, the stomach cavity. I'm starting out with a really dark grey, starting with the shadow, because these pens are really good, it means I can bleed out, so I'm just going to add some peach for a skin tone, for the gums, and I'm going to blend that in, and then I'll probably cut away because I'll need to focus on this, but yeah, I'm going to be back, and, oh yeah, there's a lot of red. I'm going to add the red in, so he's been crunching up on a few corpses before these two. And there's blood dripping down his stomach, down his curved, distended belly. That's going a bit off screen. But oh yeah, there we go, and it's going to be dripping down like that. Nice dark red blood. Like that. Lovely and gross. And of course I put blood all over the dismembered limbs as well, so yeah. That's done. We can move on from that now. Like I said, I lost the footage for the shell, but yeah, I did that in a very dark purple, fading to black. But here, I'm doing his skin in blue, and I'm gonna put up a picture here. But I was inspired by the cholera outbreak, which is a waterborne disease, and that was known for mass dehydration and turning your skin blue. I'll just put a picture up here, and it really fits with the shrunken skin look I'm going for. So yeah, I'm going with this lovely grey-blue here, just blending it into his shell. And while I do more of that blue skin tone up here, you can see I went a similar route. I've done, his hand is almost jaundiced with orange at the knuckles. Jaundice is when, I say jaundice, it's kidney failure, so he's digesting copious amounts of humans, but he can't digest them, so that was almost a theme I was going for, and then of course it fades back into the anemones. And the yellow I find really contrasts nicely with the blue of the skin behind it. Now because I want the slime to stand out a bit from the endless greys and blues that I'm putting it over, I'm actually doing it in a light pink. So this isn't Slaanesh-y, but yeah, the pink just contrasts so well with the blue and grey. Right, this is going to look like I'm ruining it by putting polka dots all over him, but fear not, I'm actually going to blend these in later. But I was inspired by, if you look at a real snail, you'll see that it's got a rippling chainmail pattern, with the spots a slightly different colour, so that was what I was inspired by. But yeah, this isn't going to look too silly when it's finished, I promise. So I did one foot is skinny, and the other foot, which is under his mantle, I decided to go the complete opposite direction, so it's so bloated it's transparent, and which is why I'm drawing so you can see the bones through the skin, almost like a living water balloon of slime. I'm just doing a tiny bit of purple on this sword just as a nod, a little bit of irony that it might have belonged to the 3rd Legion once. But yeah, the slime rusts the swords and the maces and the melee weapons away, but otherwise they're just going to be in black because I don't want them to be in focus, so I'm not doing any shading or highlights on those. Right, so yeah, the sword, the cleaver, it's getting gums. Yeah, diseased gums is what I'm going for because Nurgle's the god of gum disease as well. Why not? I've given him a blade with teeth that can have gum disease as well. Why not? So throughout the video, again, I didn't get the original sketch, but you can really see the snail influence with his one eye sticking out. You can see it now. And you're probably wondering, why did I give him rainbow eyes? There's a reason for that, and that's because there's a real-life parasite of snails, the green brood sac, which infects a snail's eyes and causes them to inflate and turn coloured and stripy. The real parasite might not be as colourful, but it's close, and if I use rainbow colours here, just really makes it pop, I think. So colouring is done. I have some shading during the colouring stage, but final stage is cross-hatching because that is how I prefer to do shading. So you can see it's just a tiny amount of multitude black lines, like tiny shadows, just going along the lines and curves that I've drawn. Yes, I'm doing it in black because I'm going to do a dark background. Have done a dark background. And because I use watercolour pens, so I actually couldn't risk. That's why there's a slightly white outline between the background and Fulgrim. But the black cross-hatching actually blends it in just a tiny bit better. And then I'm going to go along with a white pen and highlight all the shiny bits. Right, so for the big reveal, I want you to imagine that you're some poor Imperial Guardsman and you've somehow survived this battle against the Plague God's minions, and you're wandering the wastelands, and suddenly you hear something behind you, and you turn, and you look up, and you look up and up and up because it's huge, and this is what you see. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to my rambling redesign, guys. I think I might keep that as the name, the rambling redesign. It has a ring to it, I don't know. I'll workshop it, I'll think about it. But anyway, before you start asking questions, now I've done Nurglite Fulgrim, will I be doing other Primarchs with other non-canon Chaos Gods? And the answer is, I have ideas. So, I don't promise anything, but if or when or if I do another redesign, I would definitely do another video, so until next time.